Well, good afternoon to you, Scott Baker. How are you?
Mikey, how are you? We're live on Lead Better here, Friday afternoon, 5th of September. We do these conversations in 15 minutes, and given that the field note is entitled The Impact of Compressing Timelines, there'd be some obvious joke where we'd be like, today we're going to do it in 11 minutes.
Right.
But no, we might have, it might take longer than 15 minutes. We might expand the timeline to just talk about compressing timelines. How about that?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting though. What part of the creativity would really take off if we did, in fact, like say, let's do this one in 5 minutes? How effective? How much more effective would we be? How much more clear might we be? Right? Do we now? People wouldn't get to know us. They wouldn't get to know, banter and how we would like make fun of each other, or all kinds of things that they would miss. But in terms of like clearly delineating exactly what it is that we're talking about in 5 minutes, it would be a totally different show. It would be.
I'm reposting on one of our socials just to make sure. This might take longer than our normal 15 minutes.
Right.
I'm bringing everybody in behind the curtain on this one, just so we can see it happening in real time. Now, I can undercut your argument. Now, we will make the case for what's happening in the field note and the idea that there are times when you could say to the team, we got to get this done, like in this. And then what happens when you do that? And there are some big examples of where that's great, but there are some real dangers in it too. So let's all sort through this in this 15 minutes. But understand that in this discussion on Lead Better, which is about the day's field note, that have been now going out to over 93,000 people across 180 countries that we've been doing for 4 years, that when we started, the field notes were shorter than they are now.
Yeah, very short. Yes.
Right. So they're probably could be twice as long. They're still, you can read them in a minute or two. It's not like it's enormously long.
No, we experimented with some that were very short, just two or three sentences.
Paragraphs. And we were never quite down to the 2 or 3 sentences, but there were some that were like 3 paragraphs. So none of these as short as often a Seth Godin daily post is. But my point being, well, why did we expand the field notes a little bit in length? And it was to get some real teeth into something. Sometimes you just need a little bit more space and time. That's true for projects. That's true for some meetings, for some discussions. But we do know that when a leader comes in and says, we have to get this done, here's the time frame, and it's a lot less than we as a team expected, well, then we've got to make some decisions. We've got to kind of really look at priorities. And sometimes, there can go off the rails here, but a lot of times this can energize, empower, and drive some real creativity and some real performance.
Yeah. If you're going to give me a month to accomplish a project, I will probably be working on it for the last 3 days of that month, right?
Mm-hmm.
Unless, of course, there's some specific milestones or deadlines that come with each one of those weeks in the month. Mm-hmm. But even then, I will have a tendency to just work on it the day before that deadline is done, right? Over the course. People naturally plan to fill whatever time's been allotted.
And this is one of those ones where, there is a law with a name, Parkinson's law, but oftentimes we think of something as a law, like we think of something like, oh, that's an Occam's razor. And then you're like, well, define that. And you're like, oh, gosh, is that the simplest solution? Or I can't.
Right.
But in the Parkinson's law of work expands to fit the time allotted, which might not be exactly the phrase, but, as the summary, we understand that idea. And there was a real guy named Parkinson's who came up with this law. And that's how we feel it, right? We all know that intuitively, that this is what happens.
Yeah. So C. Northcote Parkinson, his actual quote is, if you have all day to do the job, it will probably take you the whole day. But if you only have 2 hours, you'll find a way to do it in 2 hours.
Yep. Right.
So how do we determine what are some tasks that deserve a shorter time frame, and when do we implement it? Right? When do we intentionally do this kind of thing? Because there is energy, there is creativity, there is a spark that happens when something that you're used to doing with the 30-day notice, all of a sudden you have a 2-day notice, right? And that kind of energy maybe is good for a group every now and then to do. Mm-hmm. So when do you choose to do it? When do you not choose to do that?
Well, the field note doesn't directly assess this, but see if this makes sense to you. It feels like to me that for this to work, like many admired leader behaviors and ideas and insights, it can't just be a technique.
Right.
You can't be, I as a leader am going to come in and manipulate my team by saying, and you've got 2 hours to do it.
Right.
Right. Or heads are going to roll. It can't be arbitrary. Right. I think when you lean in on it, it has to also be more than just the leader just wants it. Because we never, in any of our other behaviors, when we talk about how we coach around small corrections, right, we're always trying to draw people to some bigger vision, some bigger value, a superseding value, something that's in the core mission. But it can also be around a particular area of a problem or a crisis or a client need. Or if I say, I was hoping we were going to have 4 or 5 weeks to work on this, we actually need to get it done in the next 10 days because...
Yes.
Right. Now, there might be a very clear because we've got a client presentation. It could be that we have regulators coming in or some reason that we need to get that done. It might be for something fuzzier like, I'd like to get this done in 10 days because I'm actually anticipating that we may encounter some problems in this. And I also know that we're going to have some things that may or may not come in the door in terms of new demands on the team. And I want to make sure we get this behind us so that we have room to flex later. So that's a less clear definition, but it's still giving the team a sense of here's why this is important. And I think that when you look at some of these other big examples, business opportunity, national sale, like the landing on the moon, the launching of the iPhone or the different things that Steve Jobs would drive. There was either a market opportunity or there was a point of global strategy, and people would really kind of coalesce around that dramatically because they could feel it.
Right. So how often can we do that? Because that reason doesn't always exist. Every once in a while, could a leader get away with saying, I just want to stretch our ability to be creative. I want to stretch our ability and to question how it is that we're doing things and maybe come up with something new. So just for the sake of the exercise, instead of creating a false, deadline that doesn't really exist, I'm just going to create for the sake of just doing it. Maybe, and how often can we do it? Just for the sake of kind of stretching us and our team and seeing what we actually can accomplish, let's try to do this in a 3-week period. I suppose you can get people on board for that kind of thing every once in a while, but you can't live that way. Like that's going to create burnout all the time. So how often can you get away with it if you don't actually have an underlying reason?
Well, I would say that there is in that just an underlying reason, which is from time to time, we need to sprint so that we train ourselves to sprint.
Right.
It's part of the flight simulator.
Yeah.
There are times when we're going to work thoroughly through a project. There are times when we're going to have to, as a team, really go into hyper mode.
Right.
And so let's do some things where we're drilling, just as somebody preparing to be, an Olympic sprinter. They're not going to just sprint on race day.
Yeah,
Okay?
right.
And so the fact that you're saying we're training our metabolism to be capable for this, then you're like, okay, well, let's see. And then the demonstration of the sprint is sort of the fun of it, right? It's sort of the we're playing out here to see how good we can get.
Yes. So
I like that.
You and I are very aware with it, you especially in CrossFit with your heart rate. Like where your baseline exercise heart rate should be. And if you go above that, that if you're stepping into some kind of red line territory, you know that you can only exist on that. What was Jason Bourne had the quote of like, I know I could run, at some kind of heartbeat for 1.5 miles before I actually give out. And he's like, I don't even know how I know that about myself. Right.
Yeah.
It was a funny little line when he first was discovering who he was, Jason Bourne. But a lot of times your knowledge of that allows you to know, I didn't actually train very hard when I exercised today. And you actually do have like a certain amount of time where you want to be in red line exercise.
Yep. And I And I actually, use an app during some of those things that's actually showing a red line. When I'm getting it, at my age, when I'm up in 160 beats, or higher, I know how long I can go, and I kind of know where the top limit where I should likely back down because I'm not actually running from international assassins.
Yeah, no, and the point of that is that we are different. Like if I tried to exercise at what your level is, I would probably pass out.
You've done fairly well out there. You've been doing different exercise protocols.
Oh yeah, sure.
Don't count yourself short here.
I'm just saying I don't do a whole lot of. I mean, I've done cardio in the past, but I'm not ready to be at the weightlifting / cardio that CrossFit is at the time. So all to say is your red line, because I can't look at what yours is. And I was like, where's red line for you? Oh, it's at 172 beats per minute. And mine happens to be somewhere around the mid 150s. It's like, okay, I have to back off a lot earlier than Scott has to back off.
Yeah.
That's the point for
even mine's going to be wildly different than somebody who's in their 20s or early 30s.
Right.
Theirs is going to be up, they physically will have a capacity to be, up near in the upper 190s, if not over 200 for at least a short period of time before they'd have a real problem. Now,
so all
think
leaders
about
have
that.
to test into that, right?
Yeah, exactly.
In the same way that you had to test into it to figure out yourself, leaders have to know how much can my team actually handle. Because that's really the analogy that we're creating is how often can you put your team into red line?
And what I like is that it's not just the leader coming in and saying, all right, we got to get this done. Right. Now, we do know that the leader in the field note says that if you do this too often or for arbitrary reasons, it's going to create burnout. And there's actual research around that. I mean, it's in the literature that when given those sort of artificial parameters, then you can't do it.
Yeah.
And I do think that given like your Jason Bourne example, and I've used this example before, that, there was a couple of years ago, a meme around this coach had given this fire up speech, a football coach. And it was like, are you prepared to sprint for an unknown duration?
Yeah.
I'm ready. And after, a certain 175 yards, we're going to see where you're at, right? Things are going to get a lot slower pretty quickly. Right. So, and more like Naval says, which is not that you're not working hard and really focused, but it is a marathon of sprints.
Yes.
Even lions sprint and kill and then go lay under the tree for a while. They sprint and kill and go lay under the tree for a while.
So if
and
we
Cal
want to
Newport
build...
works intensely, but for 3 or 4 hours.
Right.
And then he doesn't do that for a while. Then he does it again.
Yes. The book Anti-Fragile came out and everyone was kind of postulating around the idea of how do we actually create an anti-fragile organization, right? One that when crisis hits, we actually become stronger. Like, so how do you practice that, right? How do you practice that your fragility is something you don't have to worry about it because your whole culture is around the idea of growing stronger when oppression comes.
Correct.
So if that's the case, then you want to be able to schedule sprints out. So do you think that that's a good way to maybe do this? To be like, if we haven't had a natural sprint this quarter, we're definitely going to plan for one. And so everybody in the organization knows this is an artificial sprint, but we're doing it because we want to be good at them.
Well, there certainly is in software culture and in tech development, there's sort of that idea of the sprint, right? No doubt. And it's built into that goes back into even the early Facebook culture, like of how they would kind of have these sort of crash moments. We don't really do that in a lot of other areas, but we should, because then you just get used to like, well, what's the capacity? Like how quickly can we get that done? There is, I actually try to go several years at a time without talking openly about fitness cults. But the idea that in certain ones you have what we would call an AMRAP, as many reps or as rounds as possible in a certain period of time in a minute. You can start kind of, because I was a TV news anchor, I often think in back timing the clock. Like if I want to be done here, I need to be done with this here. I need to be done with this by then. And so then the idea is not that you're rushing through the day. It's that you're actually pacing through. How long will it take me to do that? How long will it take me to do that? And when you start thinking in terms of the team, same thing. None of us would lose if we were better prepared for any moment of performance ahead of time. But we all go to Parkinson's law and we push it off, whether it's the speech we have to give or whatever it is, getting paperwork done for our kids' class for the beginning of school. We're going to push those things off. But when people are prepared, then the presentation, the work, it needs to come across calm and collected. That's what we like to see in folks. And so I think that compressed timeline actually gives it gives you the gift of relaxing a little bit in the moment where it actually really matters.
Right. When I was 17 years old, I got my pilot's license. And so I did, several months worth of training. When you're landing at an airport, you go you take off, and then you turn right again, you turn right again, and you make this rectangle as you come in for a landing. And you start to fly by dead reckoning, and you know where it is that you turn right because you recognize, the mountain or the building range. And one day, early in my training, we were doing just takeoff and landings all day long. So it was like 90 minutes just worth of, and we never even came to a full stop. It was touch and go, and you take back off because he was just, and in the middle of that, my instructor, when I had made, right when we had passed where the landing strip, we continued to go forward a little bit more. And I've got, another several hundred yards before we'd be turning right. And then another, so you could line up for the runway. And he cut off the power. Like, he didn't tell me he was doing it. Like he like throttle all the way down.
Yeah.
And he said, what do you do? And so in that moment, like, there were times where we kind of thought through what might happen.
Yeah.
He walked me through it. But until he reached over, pulled the throttle all the way down and said, we've lost our engine. What do we do? Right. And then immediately it's like, okay, right. He put me into this moment. It's so funny. I never passed that moment in the landing sequence again without thinking, if I lost
of that
right now,
yeah.
I knew exactly what I'd do. But he needed to put me in that moment of panic. Right. And it was panic because he was holding, like, my first instinct was to like, oh, I'm going to put the throttle back up. Right. Like, that's what we do. And he was holding it down. He's like, we're not putting the throttle back up. You have to land this safely. What do we do?
And this is probably why you now do to your teenagers this, okay, we got to get out and change the tire.
Yes.
See what you can do.
Yeah.
And you pop that on them as a surprise.
I do a few other things that make it feel a little bit more real world that way. Like the first time that we show up on the interstate, I make them get all the way over in the passing lane, and it's 5 lanes. And I'm like, you see that exit in a half mile? You need to get off there. Right. And so I don't tell them.
Now they got to merge, right?
Yeah,
they got to get over carefully. Yeah.
Yeah. And so until you're actually putting your team into like those crucial situations, they won't know how they're going to handle it. So they do need that practice at least once.
Well, we have proven that we can go 17 minutes, 2.5 minutes past our normal target time in talking about compressing timelines. But the importance is there. So I think it is a great idea because we probably let things kind of, sort of slough along in many of the things that we do. We could pick up the pace. We could pick up, but the goal is not to be sprinting around the clock all the time. It's to be able to have the capacity to sprint when it really matters and to know your abilities and develop the confidence in the team and in your people. We can get this done. We've done it before. And I think that's a terrific thing.
Yeah, exactly. All right, great. Thanks to talk today, and we'll definitely talk tomorrow.
All right.
All right, bye now.